Time now for our political roundtable. Joining me are two Talk Business and Politics contributors, Jason Tolbert and Jessica DeLoach Sabin. You can find their work multiple times a week, every week at talkbusiness.net. Welcome to the program, both of you.
Thank you.
Been a little while.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Raise your hand if you're the token conservative on this panel. Raise your hand if you're the token liberal on this panel. All right, okay, just making sure.
We might not disagree on much this week.
That's right.
It's true. Well, you know, if you look at what's going on at the legislature, it's kumbaya up there.
Why can't we be friends?
That's right. This week, we're friends.
Crazy. All right. The week that was, Asa Hutchinson gets to sign his signature tax cut bill into law on Friday, and the private option clears all of the hurdles, even the funding bill for 75%. Is this a case of party discipline, bipartisan cooperation, or something else?
Yes. It's a case of both. I think it's a case of what you had. You had a Republican governor that came in with a lot of wind behind his sails and said, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. He was able to forge something together that he could have a huge amount of people sign on to. Over 80% of the House signed on to this, and it just really flew through. 4 weeks, and it's already passed. I mean, just think of that dynamic compared to 2 years ago, how much discussion there was over this. This thing just went through extremely fast.
I think that this is kind of the product of a lot of strong leadership in both the House and the Senate. He has two strong leaders in both places that he can depend upon. And you know, the facts stand that the private option, it's working. Don't just discard it right now. And if you're going to make changes, be careful about it and then move forward. You can't just get rid of it.
Democrats were very quiet in their celebration for the most part on this thing, at least until it got across the finish line on that. What are Democrats saying behind the scenes in terms of the tax cut and the private option at this point in time?
Just general concern. I mean, with the tax cuts, right? You want to make sure that you can pay for those essential services that you're going to have to make the state function. You also have to have a balanced budget. I mean, it's general concerns. They're rightful. And then if you think about health care, it's kind of like, okay, you say you're going to eventually end the private option, but what does that get replaced with? We know that there's a group of people that will come together with suggestions and craft something new, but the truth is the private option is not going away. I doubt it. It might change.
Does the private option vote, does this incite the right-wing flank of the GOP? I mean, I've seen a lot of Twitter activity in the last couple of days, Jason.
I think it does to some degree, at least short term, although you question how long they can continue to oppose a policy that keeps getting passed. I mean, I guess this is the third try, and it's passed on the third try. Eventually, it kind of becomes this thing where people get used to the fact that it's there. I think the task force is going to be certainly something to watch closely, who's on the task force, and kind of how that takes shape. And then, of course, presidential politics is going to be going on at the same time that task force is meeting, and so that's, I think, going to have an impact what's going on nationally as to what people are going to want to do when 2016, 2017 gets here.
Yeah, it's a ways away before you start see. I mean, even though the rhetoric is strong right now, we're going to find a primary challenger for you. You said you were going to run against the private option, and now you voted for it, or at least you voted to end it later than you could have. I just sense that cools between now and 2016 in the primaries.
I agree with that, because ultimately the Republican Party is now it is the majority party here in the state. And they're not, you can't expect everyone to just agree on everything. Parties can have differences within themselves, and that's okay. And it takes a lot of work to recruit someone to unseat an incumbent. And Barack Obama's not going to be around forever. Yeah,
you saw some activists that opposed the private option. You really didn't see a lot of organized groups come in and oppose it like you saw in previous years. Americans for Prosperity, for the most part, stayed out of the debate. And without that large funding of the opposition, I think it sort of kind of dries up.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned President Obama earlier. We're looking at the poll numbers from earlier in the show, and the president is really at an all-time nadir here in Arkansas. I mean, I honestly, 70% disapproval, 26% approve. You don't only have Republicans and independents against you. Look through the crosstabs, you've got some Democrats that are opposed to you, and that has grown since the campaign ended in November. Despite his national popularity actually getting a little bit of a bump. I mean, he's going to be a factor in 2016, even though he's not going to be on the ballot.
The thing that stuck out to me was there was only 4% undecided. Everybody has their mind made up about President Obama. I mean, some of the other numbers you looked at, there was a large group of undecideds, but there's really not much move in those numbers. I mean, how do you move that when there's only 4% of people that don't have their minds made up?
Yeah,
Right.
you got to see if some of that opposition is still some soft opposition. Though we didn't ask, are you slightly opposed or
Keeps
strongly
firming up.
opposed?
That number keeps going higher and higher and higher every time.
All right. Let's talk about the governor's popularity in those numbers too. It's still a pretty healthy chunk, a little more than a third undecided about the governor, but he's got to be fairly satisfied with the numbers. Only 12% disapproval. It's not quite BBS, but he'd probably take it.
But would anybody be BBS, right? I mean, that's a big number to aspire to. He's doing well right now. Governor Hutchinson he's come right out of the gate and he's fulfilled some campaign promises, and I'm sure he intends on continuing to do so. So his numbers will probably remain pretty good for a while.
I think his just the stretch too. I mean, it's a little bit bigger than. I mean, it's obviously bigger than his margin of victory. So he's definitely got some momentum.
Sure, and I think the tax cut's really going to help him there as well. It really hits that sweet spot of that middle class, middle income voter, and I think they're going to really start feeling those effects of that when they file their taxes. And I think that's going to make him even more popular when they start seeing the dollars in their pocket.
I didn't cue you up on this, but Senator Tom Cotton makes a comment this week, a little bit incendiary to some folks here. He's looking pretty good in his popularity poll there, 20% approval. That's bigger than his margin of victory. Does that latest comment, does it change that at all? Does it matter?
It never hurts you to beat up on the terrorist a bit, right? I mean, nobody likes the terrorists.
Right.
So if you have some strong rhetoric coming out against them and for the national defense, people are only going to embrace that sort of talk, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, he's definitely, putting a stake in the ground when it comes to, this is my area of expertise, and he has very strong opinions, and sometimes he will use inflammatory language to make sure he drives those opinions home. And with all of the headlines that we're seeing right now, especially with everything going on abroad with ISIS, people are legitimately concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said speaks to a lot of what people are worried about. So yeah.
Does it cross the line? Is it over the line?
I don't think so. I mean, I think he kind of said on camera probably a lot tamer language than a lot of us use when we're watching the news on our television set. So people are definitely thinking what he said. So I don't think it crossed the line.
There were lots of ways he could have said what it was that he said, but that's what he chose because that's who he
Very tactfully
is.
stated there. All right. All right, we got about 60 seconds left, so bring some predictions to the table. Jessica, I'm going to let you go first. Your prediction.
Okay, so during this legislative session, a lot of the big stuff is out of the way, so I expect to see a lot of hyper-partisan legislation coming about really soon.
All right.
Yes,
That's a given.
I think she's probably right, although I don't, the term hyperpartisan to one person is a very important issue to another. But, and my prediction will go directly in contradiction to what she just said, but I think we perhaps may see first time in at least in a long time, 60-day legislative session. I think we're going to get out of here on time. We're going to wrap it up, close the doors, go
Such an
home.
optimist.
They're still going to make it. They're still
It's
gonna
a
make it
very
April. All right.
wishful prediction. I
Here's
know.
my prediction is that the capital gains tax gets revisited before the end of the session again, even though it's supposedly in the bag. I think it gets revisited again.
Sure.
All right. Jessica DeLoach Sabin, Jason Tolbert, thank you very much for being here.
You.